Welcome, it's Michael Murray with Benzinga. I have here with me today Brian Ostroff, the president and director of Arianne Phosphate. Brian, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for making some time for me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, Brian. Thank you for joining us. We know there's been a lot of interest in batteries, but of late, we're starting to hear more about the lithium iron phosphate, or LFP for short battery. What can you tell us about this?
Well, the LFP actually has been around for quite some time. But really, it's only been in the last couple of years that the West has started to pick up on it. So, we've seen Western car companies start to look to put them into their offerings. So Tesla, Ford, GM, Volkswagen, etc. And really, I think it's because of some of the advantages that we now see with the LFP. So, first and foremost, safety. There's no thermal runaway. These things aren't going to burst into flames. You get a lot more charges, a lot more cycles in the life of the battery. And that, of course, is important. And the charging cycles are easy. You don't have to let it run all the way down and charge it all the way up. And then lastly, just from a cost perspective, the LFP makes a whole lot of sense.
Absolutely. Now, given that, why has the LFP been so slow to make its way here to the West, in your estimation?
Yeah, that is a really good question, because as I say, in Asia, it's been the predominant battery for quite some time. I think a lot of it was really around the range that your car could get on a charge. And it's really been the last few years that has gotten better. So today you get decent range. You get 350 kilometers on a charge. And that's good. And particularly even in the West, a lot of these cars are going to be smaller cars. They're in the city. Getting 350 kilometers is quite a bit. I mean, if you're living in a big city, I drive to the office, after the office, I'll drive to the gym, pick up some groceries, get home, maybe I've gone 50 or 60 kilometers. And so I think that with the improved range, it just now is starting to make a lot more sense for the West, and especially for the reasons that I had previously cited.
Understood. So where does the LFP sit today, and what are its future prospects as you look ahead down the road?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you talk about kind of the future prospects, because, and I think it would surprise a lot of viewers to know this, but for all of it, again, the LFP is maybe a little new here in the West, but the LFP today is actually over 30% of all batteries. And looking into the future, most industry analysts view the LFP as heading to be the most predominant of all the battery chemistries by the end of this decade. So, why is that? Of course, we've talked about many of the car companies looking to use these in their vehicles, but also the LFP is an ideal chemistry, an ideal technology for energy storage, say at the home. As more and more people, are looking to move away from fossil fuels, or maybe live off the grid, and they're relying on solar panels or wind. It's great to capture that energy, but ultimately you have to store it for when you need it. And LFPs are going to be a really, really big part of that. And in fact, also by the end of this decade, it's projected that you're even going to have more LFPs in energy storage than you even will in the car.
Perfect. So talking about the future then, what does demand look like going into the future? I think you've already given us a pretty good look of it, but maybe a recap of what you expect in the future when it comes to demand overall.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things about phosphate, and particularly because of its use in fertilizer, is historically demand for it has always grown. So that phosphate concentrate, the demand for it grows historically at roughly 2% a year. Now, if you start to look at the demand coming with the LFP, that actually is really going to be a big game changer, because rather than looking at annual demand growth of say 2%, you're going to look at annual demand growth of 6, 7, 8%. And of course, we understand that 5 years out, two on two on two on two versus 6 on 6 on 6 on 6, you're looking at a much different number. So you are going to see demand continue to ramp up for phosphate, but in particular, when you're looking at the LFP and the demand for the LFP, what you're going to see is demand growing for the purified phosphoric acid. And if you start penciling that out, you actually are going to have to outright double your supply of purified phosphoric acid. And that, of course, is huge. This isn't 2% or 6% or 8%. Over the next few years, you're going to need 100% growth of PPA. So, new supply is absolutely going to have to be built out.
Understood. Now, we'd want to bring it back just for a second to discuss Ariane in more detail, but in the few minutes that we have left here, can you tell us why your company is best suited to address this growing need when it comes to the lithium space?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, first and foremost, Ariane today has the world's largest greenfield phosphate deposit owned by an independent. I mean, this thing is absolutely huge in terms of its size and scope. And then, as I kind of alluded to, because of the nature of our phosphate, we actually make the purest or amongst the purest phosphate concentrates in the world. And that makes it ideal to make the PPA, the purified phosphoric acid, for use in the LFP. And the reality is the only thing that's comparable out there today comes out of northern Russia. And of course, with the geopolitical concerns that we're seeing, and East versus West and things like that, that's definitely an issue. Now, in our case, Ariane's got this big deposit capable of making this high purity phosphate, and we're situated in Quebec, Canada. What a wonderful mining jurisdiction. Again, when you compare it to Russia, or even in let's say the more normal phosphates, which is China and the Middle East and North Africa. So I think from a security of supply, that's a big deal. And of course, we've seen with the LFP and a lot of these critical materials, the West is starting to get very serious about insourcing. And being here in North America, that makes us eligible for things like the Inflation Reduction Act or the Defense Production Act. Certainly we've seen here in Quebec, they're very serious about building out the whole battery ecosystem. So as Western companies look to source materials that, of course, come from, let's say, a more secure jurisdiction, but as well, there are economic advantages too. Ariane is going to be on that extremely short list. And just to that, our project, the Lac qui Parle project, is fully permitted, shovel ready. So it's ready to go. There are other projects, of course, out there starting to move forward to try and, attract partners to target the LFP. But today we're done. We're shovel ready.
Couldn't agree more. Brian Ostroff, President and Director of Arianne Phosphate. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us here today. Thank you for the in-depth breakdown of what you're doing in the industry, what's coming next, and why this industry is so poised to become the next defining leader in the space. Brian, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.